We'll get going. Okay. Um, our chairman, Richard Toole, had to go off island unexpectedly, so he will not be with us today. So I'm going to fill in for him as best I can. But several people on island have mentioned to me that they really like to do something with fresh water. We do have some issues because a lot of our ponds are private, but the public ones we would like to definitely look at. And so that's one thing, Heather, I'd like you to address too, is if you're looking at public or private. And um, but so everybody, Heather McElroy is a planner from Cape Cod Commission, and she works to develop appropriate tools and policies to help address the region's natural resources and land use challenges. And we also have Tara Lewis with us, and she is a water resource analyst who's been with them since 2020. She has a background in lake water quality, cyanobacteria accumulation and bivalves, salt marsh ecology, and invasive species management. So we should definitely um, learn some interesting things. And I'm going to stop talking because I'm going to keep an eye on the waiting room. Okay. Heather or Tara, please take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sherry. Yeah, I'm gonna kick it off here for us, and then partway through, I'll hand it over to Tara, who will carry on. So we're very pleased to have been asked to present to this group. Um, as I was, noting to Sherry just before the meeting got started, um, we've been hearing from our passionate pond people, as we like to call them, for many years about their interest in taking a deeper look at ponds, noting that ponds uh, had really uh, water quality. People across the Cape have been noticing significant changes in water quality in our freshwater ponds. And we had spent, Cape Cod community had spent an intensive effort looking at nitrogen management issues related to water quality decline in our saltwater bays and estuaries. People wanted sort of a similar level of effort uh, to look at water quality changes to freshwater ponds. So this effort is specifically geared toward freshwater. We were actually unsure when Sherry asked whether your focus is on freshwater or saltwater, but we can sort of comment on both. And also, this is a small group, and we're going to be covering sort of a range of things. And so we encourage you to, just sort of put your hand up or pause, just speak up and ask questions if you have something as we go along. Um, so yeah, are you seeing my second slide?
Yes,
Okay,
we can see it.
okay, because
The
it's
freshwater initiative, with the components, elements.
yeah,
Yeah, we
okay.
can see that.
It's odd that it's my screen is odd. Okay, anyway, you can see it. That's all that matters. So we kicked off the freshwater initiative over 2 years ago, nearly 3 years ago, to really take a science-based deep dive look at ponds and to engage stakeholders across the region to help enable action. And sort of presented on the screen here is the breadth of things that we looked at and we're going to touch on in our talk today. But broadly, we started by collecting and presenting baseline data in on ponds and lakes in an updated version of our Ponds and Lake Atlas. We actually have a new online a pond viewer. We've collected new monitoring data and made that accessible through an online portal, and Tara's going to get into that. We looked at legal issues and some of the economic impacts associated with ponds. And along the way, we engaged stakeholders in a variety of different formats to make sure we were addressing their concerns. So we engaged consultants along the way, really to help us expand our capacity and understanding here. So one of the consultants that we engaged early on was the Eastern Research Group, who conducted several different analyses characterizing the economic contributions that ponds make to the regional economy. And there's a whole report on our website. Tara's going to sort of walk through our website a little bit later on so that you are oriented to that. But there's an extensive report that Eastern Research Group, or ERG, put together for us on their findings. Significantly, we know that a high percentage of Cape Cod residents and visitors take advantage of the region's ponds, which contribute to ripple effects throughout the regional economy, including the value of properties and rentals. So, ponds are meaningful on a number of different levels. Their economic analyses also indicated a strong correlation with good water quality. Ponds with good water quality have a valuable impact on the Cape economy. We can attribute significant job and business revenue to ponds directly. And we also know that people prefer ponds with clean water and clean beaches. And importantly, respondents to one of our surveys indicated strong support for targeted pond water improvements. So this group probably understands sort of the threats to pond health, but just briefly, I'll run through this slide. Threats to pond health are really interrelated. We know that excess nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as other pollutants, are entering ponds through wastewater and stormwater. Those nutrients contribute to algal blooms, which consume oxygen and can harm wildlife, and some create toxins that are harmful to people and our pets. Erosion carries sediments, which can harm pond edge ecology, and water clarity can also carry nutrients. And then invasive species can really disrupt natural ecosystems and push out native species and habitats. And nuisance species can then make ponds difficult to recreate in. And climate change exacerbates all of these problems. So early on in part of our effort to compile some baseline information, we did some desktop analyses and used GIS to help characterize the land use activities that occur around our ponds and maybe contributing to water quality changes. We put together a pond profile for each of our 15 towns, as well as this Barnstable County profile sort of gives you an example of the kinds of information that's presented there, sort of a snapshot. We also partnered with various other entities, including NOAA and APCC, the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, which is a local environmental advocacy organization, to develop new ways to collect data. So throughout our work in the various different areas, we engaged with many different stakeholder groups. We started with conversations with municipal stakeholders, municipal staff, to really understand, what their knowledge base is about ponds, what their priorities are, their concerns and challenges. And then together with APCC, the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, we've convened a pond network, which is a group. It's really oriented toward pond groups rather than individuals, but anyone is invited to attend these meetings. But it's an opportunity for those pond groups to come together sort of on a quarterly basis, often hear from a knowledgeable speaker on a topic, but then part of the point is to reserve time during that meeting for a roundtable, and the groups will share sort of current activities that they've been up to, or challenges, or pose a question to the rest of the group. So that's been a really useful tool for the pond groups, which are some of our most engaged stakeholders in this issue. And just we'll note here, since we're on this topic, that APCC is in the process of scheduling the next Pond Network meeting. They're usually virtual, but last time many attendees expressed interest in having an in-person meeting, and so they are scheduling an in-person meeting at the APCC offices in Dennis Village for probably November 7th or possibly the 14th. That's a Friday during the day. So if any of you are interested in that, let us know, and we can connect you with the appropriate person at APCC so that you can either attend that meeting or attend future virtual meetings. There were other, stakeholder groups that we engaged along the way during our process here, but I can address that if people are curious about that, but I won't get into it right now. So in addition to the economic analyses that I mentioned, there was a number of other kinds of research that we conducted, both either the staff here at the commission or working with others outside of the office. We collected a lot of information on pond strategies, and Tara's going to touch on that a little bit in her part of the talk. And developed a number of resources to help people understand the kinds of actions that can happen, whether it's at the landscape scale or in a pond, etc. We also conducted a legal and jurisdictional analysis to better understand roles of municipalities and individuals, and this gets to Sherry's question sort of at the outset about private versus public ponds. Ponds are here on the Cape, the pond shores are largely privately owned, mostly residential property owners. But ponds that are over 10 acres in size in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are classified as great ponds and have certain, there are certain provisions allowing for providing for access to the public to great ponds. So how ponds that are great ponds are managed does become a little bit trickier than ponds that are smaller than 10 acres and maybe entirely owned by, a group of individual property owners. We can talk a little bit more about that. It's definitely not straightforward. Some other research that we did, because there are so many ponds that need attention here on the Cape. We heard from many folks interested in how do we prioritize which ponds to tackle first. So we put together a pond prioritization framework based on a couple of models that some of our towns have developed. There are a number of different approaches to that. The tool that we developed is meant to be customizable based on the community's specific interests and priorities. And then another thing that we had heard through our stakeholder engagement was really a deep need for guidance on how to manage pond buffers, given that so many of these shorelines are privately owned and thus landscaped and managed by individuals. Pond groups were just seeing that people either they really didn't know what the right thing to do is to protect pond water quality. So there was a request to develop pond buffer guidance, and I'm just going to sort of walk through that document as we had a little extra money that allowed us to add this as a task partway through our freshwater initiative larger project. So we engaged an outside consultant, Genic Studio and Crawford Land Management, to help us develop this pond buffer guide, which is a really great resource. And a hard copy, is on its way to the Martha's Vineyard Commission as we speak. I put that in the mail earlier this week at the request actually of Sakiko Isumichi, who I guess is a new staff member there. She and I had connected at our One Cape conference, and she'd asked for a copy then. So that's on its way. But I'm just going to show you some of the pages and explain a little bit of the content here. So, it starts with, why do we care really, and explains about the advantages of having a vegetated buffer, getting at erosion control, stormwater management, improving the water quality in the ponds, providing for habitat and temperature control, as well as the aesthetic benefits of having a vegetated pond buffer, naturally vegetated pond buffer. Then, some of the other elements here are, in an ideal situation, that pond buffer has no development. You have dense layers, different layers of vegetations, starting with ground covers and low shrubs, and then mid canopy and upper canopy of native plants. There's a diversity of species there that support wildlife that's native to our region. The leaves and branches that fall are left where they fall to support the insect and microbial life that supports everything else, including standing dead trees, snags, that are also very important for a variety of wildlife. And then really it's a maintenance-free zone. So where you're not applying pesticides and fertilizers. And so you sort of see this nice cross section that the landscape architects developed as part of this book that sort of outlines schematically the kinds of activities that are suitable in different areas of the buffer. The guide goes into why native plants are important over, the sort of the typical species that you might find in a plant nursery, the importance of supporting native wildlife and how that, just works throughout the ecosystem. They're adapted to their regions, so they're going to tolerate the fluctuations in temperature and drought and rainfall, etc., as well as, their suitability then makes them also really contribute to erosion and stormwater management as well. The guide has a number of different schematic plans, not meant to be plug and play by any stretch, but it gives the property owner an idea of the kinds of treatments that could be appropriate in different settings. With some guidelines about how you can fit in native species into an existing landscape. So just sort of zooming in here a little bit, one, you're beginning to add in what's nice about this is these schematics show existing conditions in gray, and a gray tone, and then the additions in color. So one here is, you're adding understory shrubs. Two is, sort of ground covers. 3 is additional trees that could provide a buffer to neighboring properties. 4 is maintaining views out to the pond, native landscaping and restoration of buffers does not need to mean that you no longer are seeing the pond. There are ways to manage that, manage expectations, as well as 5, providing access that is managed access that controls erosion through steps or a path, and how that is laid out, even adding seating that it could be appropriate. As well as, appropriate sort of lawn type treatments to maintain lawn kind of area and buffers to the street. There are lots of photos to give people a good idea of the beauty of native species. This is just showing the page on trees. There's also an extensive list that of species that has information on each species that addresses these sort of qualities or needs of a plant. So, what are its light and water needs? What kind of foliage does it have? Does it have, does it provide berries or other catkins, pine cones, et cetera, that could be beneficial to wildlife, et cetera. So you can sort of see the list there. It's just really nicely laid out. This is difficult to read at this scale, but it gives you an idea of the breadth of information that is available in this plant list. And we've also, here on the Cape, been utilizing a sort of native plant list for some time that was good, but we felt that this one improved on that. And so we're in the process of finalizing a native plant list that's based on this, but won't be part of the buffer guide, just will be its own PDF as a separate document, where we hope to actually also add here where the species that are suitable for a coastal or, basically salt spray environment could be used, because I think there's definitely need and demand for that here too. So this is the last page of the guide, and the link, you can find it on our website, but you could also use this QR code if you want to just get to that page quickly. So I'll pause there. If there were questions, I didn't see them, so I can pause and see if there are any questions before I turn it over to Tara. Yes, John.
Sherry, I want to thank you for this presentation and say how wonderful it is to learn about your work, to which I was alerted by Sherry, and to hear your presentation. I say this as someone who's for many decades been urging attention to fresh water, fresh surface water on Martha's Vineyard. I wondered, decades ago, I was in touch with John Portnoy and Crystal Lee and others at the Cape Cod National Seashore. And
Yeah.
I know John produced the atlas of their ponds, and which was very impressive, and I think was out by over 20 years ago. I was wondering if you have been collaborating with them and whether that work at the seashore has continued, and to what extent it contributed to the approach that you've been taking.
Yes, definitely. So John has long since retired. He's still active in the community. But yeah, it's funny, his name just came up this morning also as a key person to check in with about Wellfleet's ponds. We have been in touch throughout the Freshwater Initiative with the Seashores Natural Resource chief. I'm not exactly sure what his title is, but Jeff Saunders, and Sophia Fox, who is one of the scientists there who has been collecting data on their ponds for a long time. And Sophia especially has been a great resource. We are so one of the things that Tara is going to talk about is our pond data portal. We've been working to compile data that's been collected by various entities over many, many years into one place and present it in a way that helps people, really understand what's happening in a given pond. And we've coordinated with the seashore on that data collection effort as well. So they're on furlough right at the moment, and they've got other funding challenges, but they continue to be a key partner in this work. All right, we'll not see any other questions. Oh yeah, go ahead. You're muted, John.
Thanks. Yes, as an aside, we've done one baseline survey of water quality of fresh surface water on the Vineyard a long time ago, and Krista Lee, who headed the coastal lab at the National Seashore, kindly came down with an assistant and actually helped collect the data and then did all the analysis for us here. And the commission has that data set. I was wondering if there are any examples that you've pulled out of the large number of ponds in your program that you can present or one could see as case studies from start to finish that might include some efforts at treatment and follow-up and any signs of improvement in any ponds.
I'm going to ask Tara if she wants to fill that question.
Okay.
Right here now on the spot, no, probably not. I can't, I don't think I could do that. I mean, there are a number of ponds that come to mind that we've been following water quality, and then also, doing pre-management, pond management, post-pond management. Off the top of my head, I can think of a Shumet Pond in Mashpee, which has had an extensive amount of monitoring done to it by the local community, as well as folks from the Joint Base Cape Cod and also USGS, looking at ways to, looking at the water quality of a Shumet. And then also there's been a number of strategies, mitigation, restoration strategies implemented there, and looking at the water quality post strategies. I mean, that's a kind of a timeline that I could detail for that pond, among other ponds, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head the effectiveness of any of those strategies. I do have that information in a lot of different forms, but just don't have it in front of mind at this moment. So I couldn't give you like a breakdown of the pond's response to each of those individual strategies that have been implemented.
Thanks. If I could just quickly reply, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot or expecting an immediate response with a data set, but rather just to know whether that's a view that is possible and that either you have or one might be able to take to look at a pond from, for example, the beginning of its involvement with the program and any, what the backstory was to the pond before that time, and then what's been done since.
Yeah.
Because I think that might help to market the idea here on the Vineyard to people, to say, here are examples of, here's how you get started, and then here's what it would look like a couple of years down the line, and so on, in couple of different cases. The other, one other thing I'll quickly mention is that it was useful in dealing with some threats to ponds here on the island. In fact, from the possibility of public recreational use, to point out that the coastal plain pond shore is evidently a globally rare habitat. And so I'm wondering if that aspect of ponds is an issue for you, and whether, given the large number and variety of ponds that you've got, that there are particular ponds that where you're making that a priority either because it has a largely intact vegetation community, or it's sort of lends itself to more easily being sustainably conserved.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when Tara talks a little bit about our regional pond monitoring program, she may touch on some aspects of that too, but just at a sort of a big scale, we part of the funding that we received to do the freshwater initiative included a big chunk that we set aside for monitoring, and we identified 50 ponds across the region that would be part of that monitoring effort. We had funding for 3 years, and we hope to continue that funding. There's funding identified that will enable us to continue that monitoring for those 50 ponds. But we made an effort to make sure that the variety of ponds, we have 890 freshwater ponds here on Cape Cod. So picking 50 was a little bit of a challenge, but we wanted to make sure that the various types of ponds were well represented, and including coastal plain ponds, which are typically very shallow and have, this very unique assemblage of plants that some years may never emerge because the water levels are so high, and then on other years are thriving and evident because water levels are low. So those are well represented in our monitoring program, and I don't want to say that more shouldn't be done to protect coastal plain ponds around the Cape, but we have many great examples that are actually well protected, with most of their shoreline protected in some permanent way. So that, yeah, it's definitely an issue that we're very focused on here. One of those assemblages is actually sort of oddly here in Hyannis. Sort of Hyannis, I think most people think of as the regional commercial center. But there's also the Hyannis Coastal Plain Ponds Complex, which is protected through fish and wildlife restrictions. So anyway, probably enough said on that. Tara, why don't I turn it over to you? I'll turn off my mic.
That's great. Thanks, Heather. That sounds good. So will you advance to the next slide, please? Or should I request control? There, thank you. Okay, so another important component of the Freshwater Initiative was to expand the water quality monitoring and to collect and analyze historic water quality data. There have been a lot of data collected on the Cape by volunteers, town staff, and others for decades. Our goals were to collect as much of the existing data into one place, and also to expand our monitoring efforts to get consistent data on a set number of ponds. Advance. Next. So the Pond and Lake Stewards Program is a program that has been on the Cape since 2000, early 2000, that has produced years of data through dedicated town and volunteer efforts. But the data are limited. Not all the ponds are consistently sampled, and it's sort of a snapshot nature of monitoring that they do. They have 1 or 2 samples per year. It makes it difficult to understand changes through seasons, to identify trends, and to get a picture of water quality across the region. Next slide, please. So we initiated, as Heather alluded, to the Regional Pond Monitoring Program to increase data collection and consistency across the Cape. So we took a very deliberate approach to selecting ponds for this program. We wanted it to be representative of ponds across the region in terms of size, depth, shore characteristics, level of development, watershed development in the watershed, uses within the pond, And we also wanted it to be geographically distributed throughout the region. We coordinated this effort with existing monitoring efforts like APCC and also National Seashore and town monitoring efforts to avoid duplication. So currently, APCC started monitoring these 50 ponds in 2023. There are 2 teams that monitor once a month from March to November in the deepest part of the lake, and they sample for temperature, dissolved oxygen, Secchi disk depth, pH, chlorophyll A, total nitrogen, total phosphorus, among other parameters. Yes, thank you. So to capture the historical monitoring that has taken place over the years, let me back up for a second. So this historical monitoring started in 2001. The pond and lake stewards have been monitoring and actually continues to this day. They sample once a year, looking to capture the worst case scenario. So typically August, September timeframe. The goal of the freshwater initiative was to get all of this data into one place, into one format, use big data tools to do data analyses so that we could get a better sense of pond health across the region. So the data has been collected from 2001 till present. We have about 234 ponds that have been sampled, 239 sampling locations, more than 5,000 sampling events, more than 125,000 sampling results with 14 parameters that have been measured. So it was quite a task to get all of this data into one format and in one location. So to make all of this data, plus the data that's currently being collected through the Regional Pond Monitoring Program, accessible to the public, we developed this freshwater data portal. We already have the marine water quality data portal, and so we added to it this freshwater data portal. I think the next slide. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. These are both all kind of bleeding into each other. So the data portal provides an interface that allows a user to interact with the monitoring data. You can select pond, you can select a parameter, you can view trend analyses, and the data will be updated on a regular basis. All of the data, new and old, that have been shared with us is now publicly available through this regional water quality data portal. So this right here that you're looking at is the landing page for the freshwater data portal. You can zoom in and search for a pond, click on it, or you can type in the name of the pond in that search bar at the top. So in the next slide, I've selected Pilgrim Lake in Orleans. And after you click on the pond, some general information about the lake pops up on the left-hand side. It tells you what town it's in, if it's a great pond or not, the maximum depth, the surface area, as well as some land cover and land use information within the 300-foot buffer that's on the lower left side of that panel. And then if you click on that Pilgrim Lake data view, it'll bring us to the data portal, data panel. And here you different ways. You can look at, actually, Heather, I can't use my mouse. So you point out at the top, you can select parameter. You can select by monitoring program. You can choose years or months. And then down below, you'll have a number of different plots that will show you time series, property to property plots, as well as isoplex. But this is a screenshot, it's a snapshot, so I can't actually click on any of these things. So if you go to the next slide, it details the parameters that you can select to look at in this data portal. So all of those parameters are available to view. And then the plot types that you can see these data in our time series, the one at the top. It also will do a trend analysis, a linear regression for the data. And then there's the property to property plot, which shows how the chosen parameter changes against another parameter. And then the isoplex displays measurements over time and at all depths where measurements were taken. All of the charts can be zoomed and panned, and also the individual plots can be exported, as well as the data for each pond, all the data or a select number of data. It's all exportable so that anyone can take that data and analyze it and do anything they want to look at it in any number of ways that they want to outside of the actual data portal. Next slide. So we heard from the stakeholders that they they wanted more information about strategies that would be available to deal with the various water quality challenges in ponds and lakes. So we conducted a ton of research from Massachusetts to New England and actually beyond, and we compiled what we found into a database of resources. Next slide. We've organized them according to the scale at which the approaches apply. So here we have in pond, onshore, or watershed. And the strategies address the range of threats that actually Heather mentioned these earlier in the presentation: excess nutrients, pollutants, algal blooms, erosion, invasive and nuisance species. Next slide. So you can access the strategies either through this interactive web page, or we also have fact sheets that are available. And if you wanted, you could actually download the entire Excel spreadsheet. The interactive web page looks like this. You can select based on approach. Again, Heather, if you point to the top of the screen, you can see that there's an approach option, which offers you things like algae, vegetation, nutrient, or sediment. There's goals, which are to protect, to manage, or restore. The threats, as we already listed through the threats a couple times, and then scale, which refers to the in-pond, pond, shore, and watershed. So the next slide, I'll show you an example of how I stepped through. So I selected in the approach option, vegetation management. And then for the scale, I did an in pond, and it gave me these options that you see in the green tiles. So I selected vegetation harvesting, and you can see that there's a description of that process, that strategy, the threats that it addresses, the goals, and even the co-benefits, considerations, consider before you maybe would want to implement vegetation harvesting in your pond. And then also, if you scroll down to the web page, it'll provide other things like cost, permitting, and other considerations. Next slide. So to see these strategies in action, we have a pond restoration viewer and an accompanying story map, which I won't get into in this presentation. But the resource was created to share pond-specific challenges, solutions, and lessons learned to help inform further action. Updates are added to this map as information becomes available. This homepage shows a variety of different restoration projects. It's filterable by management approach. You can see that over on the left. And each pond contains a description with links to more projects. So on the next slide, you can see I've selected for nutrient management. It's highlighted in bold. And so these are the ponds, and I also zoomed into a particular area on the Cape. And so here we have ponds that have been have had nutrient management action implemented on them. I selected Mystic Lake and Barnstable, and you can see that there's a pop-up window that tells you what was done, in this case, alum treatment, and it was done to address algal blooms and decreased water clarity. And if you scroll down in that pop-up box, you can see other information like results, and often there's even a report that is linked, and you click on it and you can get more details about that particular restoration effort. Okay, next slide. So okay, let's see, let me back up a second. Another component of the Freshwater Initiative that we did for this, we used GIS to analyze ponds, and we examined characteristics that may contribute to changes in water quality. We determined potential internal and external drivers of water quality change. We have background information and introductions in this first two tabs, pond productivity and drivers of change. And then in that third tab, pond stress score, sorry, stumbling here, pond stress scores. If you click on the next slide, you can see that what that looks like. And this is an interactive map that shows all the ponds on Cape Cod ranked by their cumulative stressor score. And this stress score was obtained by adding together things like it's a pond's adjacency to golf courses, pond size, the amount of impervious cover within the 100-foot buffer. They all contributed to this score. So on a scale from 1 to 20, ponds with a score from 1 to 5 were considered minimally stressed, and then ponds with scores from 16 to 20 were considered highly stressed. And then the next slide shows another interactive map that is part of this component, this output, that shows phosphorus loading hotspots. So we identified locations along pond shores where impervious surfaces that were within 100 feet of a pond. So you can zoom in and it'll show you around a pond's shoreline where there are impervious surfaces. You can actually click on it as well, and it'll tell you what kind of impervious, whether it's a paved road, a driveway, even packed gravel. And the goal of this map is to help identify ponds where immediate, meaningful stormwater management action may be taken to help improve the water quality of a pond. Next slide, please. So the freshwater strategy resulted in 13 key recommendations. They range from finding new funding sources to expanding data collection and availability. We have the developed model wetland bylaws and order of conditions as one of the recommendations. Also continuing to educate residents and visitors alike about the fragility of ponds and to foster appreciation and respect for ponds. And now I'm just going to show you a couple of screenshots of the Freshwater Initiative webpage. This is what it looks like when you first go there. And then if you scroll down, you can see the project components. And each of these boxes on the left-hand side, the images, those are links that will bring you to these resources. So there's one for stakeholder information. We didn't talk about that very much, but you could go dive deep into their communication toolkit for a number of different audiences. The Cape Cod Ponds Network that Heather mentioned. And then the next slide, there's the data management for the data ones that I was referring to, the Cape Cod Water Quality Data Portal, the Regional Pond Monitoring Program, and then again, the Atlas that Heather mentioned. So these are all clickable buttons that will bring you to these various resources. And I think that's it. We could go for a few more screenshots, but we decided to stop there, and you guys can go yourselves and dig in. I believe that Sherry had included a link to this website in her initial invite to this presentation. And with that, I think that I am done, and we can field some more questions if there are any.
Great, thank you.
Tara
That was
and-
amazing.
and-
The website is amazing. Sorry, Adam.
Thank you.
No problem. Tara and Heather, thank you for coming and Julie to present this. As usual, the Cape Cod Commission does such great work. I appreciate you coming and sharing this stuff with us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My question is, you showed a slide like with the model bylaws and the other kinds of things that needed to happen. We have been struggling with some of the things that we're doing in terms of getting some. All right, we know all this stuff. We've got studies to the top of the ceiling, and I made a big point of knocking those studies off my desk and saying, all right, what are we going to do? We know the problem. We don't need. Have you guys, you have 12 things that are really interesting, like the model bylaws and stuff. How much have you done to accomplish the implementation part of it?
Heather, you want to go back to that slide so we can see those?
Yeah, let's see.
I'm sorry, Heather. I should have stopped you before.
No,
It's
not a
rhetorical
problem.
question. I just want to know. I mean, have you guys made a lot of progress and stuff? Thank you. Because we would like to follow a lot of this stuff in terms of the pond buffer guidance and the model wetland bylaws and stuff.
Yeah.
Have you guys done a lot of these things?
Well, we're working on it. So the freshwater strategy, I forgot now when we actually wrapped it up. It was not that long ago, like this spring. And then things like the Regional Pond Monitoring Program, they carry on. The funding for that runs through the end of this year, but we're anticipating additional funding to keep that going. So I think the developing the wetland model wetland bylaws is something that we hope to move on in the near future. There's definitely demand for that. And as a sort of a side note, we've been working on coastal resiliency guidance as well, specifically related to regulating land subject to coastal storm flowage. We've developed model bylaws and regulations for the floodplain as well. And that is just, it's it's a slow process. But
Yeah.
we know that our communities are interested in doing more to regulate, activities in the floodplain. And also we know that they're interested in doing more to regulate activities adjacent to ponds, freshwater ponds. So it's a sort of a side by side,
I
getting
didn't, I
those
didn't mean to
model
put you on the
bylaws.
spot. I
No,
didn't
no,
mean to
no.
put you on the spot and stuff. That's the kind of discussion that I would like to have continuing with you guys so that we could, um, you guys are always a little ahead of us and we could avail ourselves and share what we're doing and I think that would be very helpful. I got to go to a site visit, but I did want to again thank you guys very much at the Cape Cod Commission and just praise, like I said, I frequently follow Christie and other kinds of stuff, and I'm always amazed at at the projects and the things you're doing. Thank you for giving us the time. Thank you for
Well,
coming.
our pleasure, Adam, and thank you so much for those kind comments. And absolutely, we would like to collaborate with you all more often. I think it's just, you get focused on your own
Yeah.
thing and you don't reach out, but we should be collaborating often. I know everyone's on that page here. So,
I
yeah,
appreciate it, and we'll on our end we'll reach out and strengthen the bonds as well. Again, thank you,
absolutely.
Sherry. I'm running over to the Ocean View. I have a site.
Oh, I see Julie's here too.
It used to be our favorite watering hole, the Ocean View. That's why he was up, but it burned. So we're
Oh,
reconstructing it now. But
oh, wow.
Bummer.
That's sad.
yes, Julie, thank you for joining us. Do you have anything to add? I don't want to put
Can
you on
you
the spot, but
can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Well, you asked questions about volunteers. I can say some things about that if that's relevant. Um, Other than that, we do hope that we can continue to do monitoring of the ponds. And in order to address the concerns that were mentioned in terms of if there are treatments in ponds, certainly, starting in 2023, we now have 3 years of data on the 50 ponds. That's just a starter if you want to look at the effects of anything. I think Tara and Heather both, having looked at the pond atlas and the pond view and the data that you have on ponds, it's hard to have enough data to view those treatments over time. So having a longer time horizon would really be useful for being able to evaluate whether it's the alum treatment or the oxygen treatment or, things that have been done around the edges of the pond. So, but if you want to know about the volunteers and how APCs manage to do that, I can also address that if there's time today. I don't know, maybe you're already out of time.
I think we have some time. How does everyone else feel about that? For me, we're all doing so much and, with the volunteer program, it would have to be something that, could run on pretty much on its own. Of course, I'm here to help facilitate, but I can't run another program right now. But yeah, John, is that a yes for everybody that they'd like to hear about the volunteer program? Okay. Please, Julie, go ahead.
Okay, so with the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, and when I started, that we were a much smaller staff, and soon after we started working on the freshwater initiative, we got a person named Dee Marsh who had worked with Brewster and others. She is amazing, and she encouraged us to use Bloomerang. She is our volunteer coordinator. And APCC has volunteers for a lot of different things, including native plant sales and our cyano program and the pond initiative that Heather and Tara have been talking about. So we had volunteers before we had D, but now that we have Bloomerang, that would be the other person that you're talking about or the other program. She interacts with all our programs And the volunteers come in, they sign up for opportunities, which seems a bit invasive at some point. You know, initially we're asking them lots of questions, and like, oh, I'm not sure I want to go down this hole. But the way she handles it, and then you asked about training. Once they're in, they can identify the kinds of things they're interested in volunteering for. So they can help us with data. They can help us with a lot of things. You know, Cape is full of people who are retired, who have time and want to do meaningful work. And so we've been really blessed with the number of people that sign up and they come out. For the Pond Network, they, as Heather and Tara both know, they will show up at 7:30 in the morning and work through 12, and they get in a canoe and they do 2 ponds. And now some of them are even having to put dry suits on, because once the water's 60 degrees, that's a safety feature. So we typically don't use volunteers in November or March. We just have our own staff handle it. But for the rest of the season, generally we don't have to use dry suits. But when the water gets to be 60 degrees, they're also willing to do that. So let's see. Oh, the training. So what we do with the training is we have the 2 pond programs that I manage overall, as it's the cyanobacteria program and the freshwater initiative program. And so we have 2 separate trainings, and that's virtual. We had to make the new facility, that's the Koppel Center. So we could have some trainings there, but the limit there is cars. So we can only have about 20 cars for 40 people. But so there's a virtual training, and then it gets recorded and it's on our website. So you can go to the APCC website, you can hear with a PowerPoint the training, and they have to have had the training before they go in the field to do anything on the ponds. So depending upon which one it is. So it's a requirement. So I'll leave it there. If there's other questions, you know, they get trained. Oh, I know the other one you asked about was supervision. Many of the volunteers now have been doing it sufficiently. I mean, the cyanobacteria monitoring, for instance, we go out in person then to train the groups. So the Orleans Pond Coalition Group or the Wellfleet Pond Coalition Group, they collect samples for us. So when we monitor 140 ponds every 2 weeks, we couldn't possibly, with our interns, our 5 summer interns, we couldn't possibly do all of those. So the pond groups themselves go out and they have the equipment and they go and monitor the ponds, and we collect the bottles from them and bring them into the quote unquote our office. It's not a lab. If it's a lab, you have a lot more regulations. So we don't have a lab. We have an office where they bring the samples in, and we look at them under the microscope, we run the fluorometry, and all the rest of that.
And who does the analysis? Do you have the volunteers do that also?
No, they just collect the samples. The volunteers just collect the samples. But, you know, this is a sad state of science, but for our 5 summer interns last year, we had 95 applications. Yeah, and so we hired 3 college graduates to work at intern wages, and they're still working for us because we go through November 7th. We need some fall, and so they were primed for the fall hires. So we have 3 college graduates that are working as interns, and their jobs will end on the 7th of November, and they're looking at grad school and other things because there's just so little money in the science field. So it's not a bad time if you want to find people, and if you're needing people, we get a lot of applications. Yeah. At $20 an hour.
For us, it's the housing. I'm sure it's the problem.
Oh,
for you
yeah,
too.
that's true. It's true. So like a lot of grandmas and great grandparents who had summer houses on Cape end up, but we had 2 come from Wisconsin this year. And so we're actually collecting where they found places to stay so that we'll have those places available for students next year.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions?
Okay. Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you guys. You've given us a lot of resources, that's for sure. And thanks for being available to help out with everything that if we do launch a program.
Yeah, more than happy to
Wonderful.
help.
Yeah, if anyone wants any more like hands-on deeper dive into anything that was presented, reach out, let me know. I'd be happy to walk anyone through the website or the data portal.
Yeah, that is amazing. I looked at that and was just completely in awe. So, okay. Does anyone else have any other questions or?
I have a question, Tara. Are Cape Martha's Vineyard ponds in the portal? They're not there yet. Okay.
I think
Quick
that's
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bryce Buto. I'm the health agent for Edgartown. Have you on the Cape heard of the Great Pond Foundation or MV-Cyano? So the local boards of health work with them. They're a team of scientists to do some testing for mostly algal blooms. I'm sure the NBC is familiar with them too. I'm just wondering if that's an opportunity for collaboration there. I'd be happy to send their info over,
Yes,
or vice
please.
versa.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I had another question. Can you just touch again on how maybe you've helped inform municipal regulation, and like how you've been able to help it be changed? I ask because the all 6 local boards of health out here have adopted the same fertilizer regulation. This was 10 years ago, and it was with help from the NBC. And it's changed, or it should have changed a little bit since then. Some parts of the regulation are now less permissive than, more permissive than what the state requires. However, there is a provision in there that go with the stricter regulation, whether it's local or state. I'm just wondering if we can kind of, if and when we decide to change it, how you've seen success with, how your data informs regulatory changes on the municipal level.
So it's interesting that you all have fertilizer bylaws. That's you may or may not be aware, but there's an effort among several of the Cape communities, and I think Nantucket, to increase regulations or restrictions on fertilizer use and maybe pesticides as well. And they have home rule petitions that are pending, and there's actually a hearing coming up, I think on Monday. So anyone who wants to testify, there's a role, an opportunity there for that. We did years ago develop model fertilizer regulations as part of a fertilizer DCPC that we had for Cape Cod. There's a sort of a longer tail there, but you all have districts of critical planning concern as well, right? So this, was a tool that is available on just on Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod, and we use that to advance some improved fertilizer regulations among many of the communities. I think half, like 7 or 8 towns, decided to change their regs based on that. We are, as we noted, there's been a request to develop model regulations that presumably conservation commissions, but maybe the zoning could be a component, I'm not sure, to address development within that buffer area to ponds. So that's not something we've started yet, something we need to sort of scope out, have a better, engage with our conservation agents and understand what exactly they're hoping to achieve in those regulations. But this is an activity or a service that we provide to our towns. Since I've been here, developing model regulations that are really often they are designed to be sort of a la carte, so that the language and the approach is laid out, but how restrictive a town wants to be is sort of up to them, and you can sort of pick from different options and incorporate the components that make sense. So, you know, when we develop model regulations, it's based on an expressed need and not usually from our own perception of what is needed. So the idea being that there is an appetite for making some changes at the local level. There's some basic support for it, and that we, in our role here as the regional planners, we can devote time to this activity that you at the local level often don't have time for, and compile our knowledge base and access experts in the field as well. So that is something that, yeah, is an ongoing thing, a service that we'd like to provide. I will also note, Tara or one of us touched on these communication frameworks, which is a tool that we've developed for different kinds of projects. And they're super useful. It basically is in one place. It's a package for typically geared toward municipal staff to have talking points and information at the ready for communicating with the public about a certain topic. And we started doing this with regard to efforts to manage nitrogen in our whole wastewater management planning effort, the 208 plan, as we call it here on the Cape. But we've since created these communication frameworks or toolkits for different topic areas. So they're all available on our website. The ones, and I think are easily sort of modifiable to different topic areas. But the ones we've done most recently, I want to say, have to do with coastal resiliency and the floodplain issues. So we try to do those together with developing a bylaw, because we recognize that getting a bylaw passed or regulations passed involves having an educated and informed public.
Right. Yeah, that's great with the communication framework. I'll definitely take a look at that. And our fertilizer regs are from a DCPC. So if any adjustments, or the town just has to submit that they want to make a modification to the DCPC and we can make it stronger. I know we looked at pesticides before, but
That's
US
tricky.
agriculture, we couldn't really kind of go there. So we had to back off on that. But Bryce, definitely, yeah, bring the concerns and we could modify to the DCPC.
Sherry, would it be
That would be
easier
wonderful.
if all the towns submitted to you at once, or if one town did it and then the rest of them could just use that as a baseline?
If all towns submitted, that would be great. Or
Okay.
if one town takes the lead and everybody else says, yeah, this is what we'd like to do. I'd love to see, I'd love to see vineyard lawns everywhere. That's the VCS that they allow no fertilizers used.
I will also say, I think Squib-Knocket is a DCPC that did eliminate pesticides. So we do have one DCPC that has that regulation within the Board of Health. Also, hi, Drew Belsky from the health agent of Tisbury and on the Board of Health in Chilmark.
Great. So there's a jumping off point. We can use that verbiage. Any other questions? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I do know that the Squib-Knocket Association did approach the Board of Health to reduce or remove that pesticide regulation, but it was around the same time that we had the largest spike in cyanobacteria testing, that the lab that we had sent it to had to double check that it wasn't a typo. So it was hard to say yes to one while being severely concerned about the other. A question I did have, and I don't know if you addressed this, I apologize, in your research, but have you compared your results to the MEP findings on any of these ponds? I'd just be curious on, because a lot of our nitrogen regulations are based on those and mesh estuaries project studies, and I'd be curious if what you're finding, either in how you've been addressing nitrogen, or if you have any difference in what you're seeing compared to what they saw.
That's an interesting question. I'm not aware of having done that. Tara, do you have anything to offer there?
No, I wonder though, because I think Jay would be the person to talk to about that, and he may have made some, looked at some comparisons between what we're seeing, not just in the ponds, but in the coastal embayments in terms of nitrogen and what the MEP report indicates. So I actually I'm gonna follow up with Jay with that on that question, because that is interesting and good point.
Awesome.
And if
Thank you.
you send me Jay's response, I can send it out to Water Alliance to make sure Drew gets that. It's always been a point, a lot of our data has been the pond data was very dated. It's some of our ponds for the MEP are from 2002. Some of the data goes back to, so it's always a concern. DEP, I've mentioned it to them before, and they're always like, it's just take this and run this. We're not going to do these again. So
yeah, I'd be curious what results we could all show to them and say, hey, look at the difference in either A, what we're doing, or B, what we found based on what you projected.
Or at least find like a ratio of increase or decrease or something that we could, like, a multiplication factor that we could put on it or take away from it or something.
Yeah.
Maybe not do the whole studies again, but find a little tweak to modify.
I do know, and we don't need to go too far into it, but I know a lot of those reports based nitrogen effluent from septic systems as like 35 milligrams a liter. And to quote George Hoyfelder, if he ever tested a standard Title V that had that effluent, he would drink it. So, I think that some of those numbers are off.
Yeah.
And be curious, with all the testing comparisons.
Yeah, I've heard him say that.
Also,
for the record, I wouldn't drink it. But anyway, I'm sorry. What were you saying, Bryce?
No, just I know that there's additional considerations for for a DCPC or a more regional initiative, and obviously we want to inform the public and everything that goes with that. But in terms of regulation, if it's a Board of Health regulation, you don't necessarily need to have a lot of people, like a large majority. It can be a 2/3 majority on a 3-person board. That's all you need. So I think that there's once we all kind of share data and get on the same page, we can be surprisingly nimble, and especially if we're all kind of separately collaborating together. I think we can do some really important stuff.
Yeah, our boards of health are our agents are very collaborative and working on things. They meet regularly, so it's been awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
But one quick question about utilizing your incredible data set and portal about the Cape Cod freshwater ponds. If one wanted to, for example, select on the basis of surface area and depth, and to look at, for example, phosphorus levels in ponds, is that relatively easy to do or possible? To go through the data set to sort?
Yeah, no, you actually, you could, if you were to export the data and do the sort yourself, yes, you could do that. But through the portal, we don't have the physical characteristics of the ponds as a way to filter, or we can't use that as a parameter upon which to plot. You're only able to use the monitoring data either in the pond or ones that are analyzed in the lab. So that's so the short answer is no.
are the data set up so that it's straightforward to export it?
Yes, very, but
Okay.
you have to do it pond by pond. But yes, you can export the entire data set for the, you know, as far back as it dates. I mean, you wouldn't want to export 240 ponds data anyway, would you? Or yeah, you would.
No.
Okay,
No.
no, I wouldn't
But I
either.
mean,
So you could select
yeah.
certain ponds that you want to look at based on their physical characteristics or whatever parameter you want to look at, and then export those selected ponds.
We have other ways of
Yes.
exporting data too. So if there's a specific question that you're trying to answer and you don't find a way to do it through the data portal, you know, ask us and we can consider exporting the data from the server, basically.
Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
point. Thanks,
way.
Heather. That's a good
I
thinking.
mean, I think off the top of my head, I mean, with respect to dealing with ponds here on the island, it would be of interest to be able to compare them to ponds of comparable size and depth on the Cape within your data set. We don't have ponds that are anywhere near. I think the deepest pond here is freshwater pond is no more than 30 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have the depth or the size. And so it'd be interesting to be able to track what's going on with the comparable ponds on the Cape
Mm-hmm.
against what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And that might also make it more relevant or useful in screening for and considering, you know, possible interventions.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and
So
thank you again.
yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, you know, as you spend time with the portal, if you've got some specific requests, circle back, and because I think we would benefit from that sort of shared data look also. So
Okay, any other questions? Anyone else?
No.
That is
Cool.
great. I just have a couple of announcements that for our Vineyard people, and maybe Heather and Tara, you'd like to come too. Brian Horsley is going to do a presentation today for the Cape, or for, I'm sorry, the Cape Cod, the Chilmark Board of Health and Concom and Abel's Hills Association. He's presenting in Chilmark and it is on Zoom, and that link, the Zoom link, is attached to the email for this link. And he will be talking about urine diversion and the Brightwater system that they process the urine with it. It's a promising technology. It's, you know, I'm always looking for another tool, especially if it'll save homeowners a lot of money. So that should be a great presentation if anyone is interested. I did attend the Rich Earth Institute's urine diversion 2-day seminars. I will post those sessions when those are available, and I will also post the sessions for the One Cape presentation because I just received those. So there were some really good, that's how, looking at the agenda for One Cape is how I brought Heather and Tara to us today. So they've got some really awesome presentations too. You know, it's a lot of, you can kind of pick and choose through the agenda about what you want to, what your interest is, but I will make those all available also. And thank you so much for the communications frameworks. I really want to take a look at that and, you know, see how we can, because that's huge. It's how you present things. It's I personally get lost in the science, and I have problems explaining things to people sometimes, so that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks. So, okay. Is there any other questions, announcements, or anything else, or are we ready to go?
Good.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch with more
Yeah.
details. Thanks.
Sounds
Thanks.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sherry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye.
very much indeed.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.